organization. We're a national nonprofit organization. We really work to advance knowledge about philanthropy in the United States and around the world. One of the ways we do that is by hosting events and co-sponsoring events and working with partners like YNPN. And we have a full-fledged library upstairs on the 6th floor. In fact, somebody was trying to return books right before this session, so thank you. So you can check out books and you can use our resources upstairs to find funding. Part of my job is to really deliver training and curriculum around 3 key areas that most nonprofit professionals are looking for advancement in: fundraising, yeah, right, organizational sustainability, and leadership and management. And no doubt this panel fits into those very much so. Some events coming up that I'd love for you to save the date for. One is Presence and Persuasion, Polishing Your Fundraising Pitch. So as we're looking for careers in the nonprofit sector or working on professional development within our current role, that fundraising is certainly a huge part of a lot of our work. And so maybe if you're new to a role or new to a nonprofit, this workshop is a full-day workshop that will really give you the skills and develop your fundraising pitch skills. So that's happening on April 10th. And you can actually save $100 if you register within the next week or so, and there's more information out there in the lobby on that. And then the other thing I want to mention is we have a workshop coming up. It's actually a webinar that's March 24th on major gifts asks. So that's another skill that I feel like a lot of people in the sector don't get some good kind of coaching or how to do this. How do I make a meeting with a major gifts with a wealthy person, and how do I set up that meeting, and what does that meeting look like, and what does the ask look like, what does that cultivation, again, path look like? And that's a webinar happening March 24th for an hour and a half with actually a local consultant and nonprofit coach named Claire Axelrad, and she's one of the top fundraising bloggers in the country. So you can check that out also on a green flyer in the lobby as well. That's all I want to share with you, and just to really share that we value our partnership with YNPN so much in hosting these events and appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to hand it over to Hannah. Have a great panel, everyone. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, thank you so much, Sarah Jo and Ida, for letting us host. We also really value and appreciate you. Thank you, all of you, for coming, and thank you so much to the YNPN Major Events team, Melissa, Laura, Erica, and Lisa. Much appreciated. So we're really excited for our first major event of the year and our first career panel. My name is Hannah, and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm the Major Events Manager for YNPN. So this is really exciting because we're all here from very different backgrounds, different ages. Some of us are from the nonprofit world, some of us are from the corporate world, some of us just graduated from college, some people are in graduate school. But I think what's really exciting is that we're here for a similar reason, and that's because for whatever reason we're interested in taking a leap. So whether that's from one sector to another, or whether that's starting your own business or growing within your own company, that's really great, and we're happy to have you here. And we're really grateful to have you for us, so thank you so much. And what's great is that you are from very different backgrounds as well, but are also here because you're interested in educating all of us, so thank you so much. So I'll do quick intros. You have full bios in your program, so I'll just say what you're doing now, and then we'll have some Q&A from me, and then we'll have Q&A from you guys at the end. We'll have 15 or 20 minutes. Great. Okay, so Sky is the CEO and founder of Heal Solutions, providing fundraising strategy and capacity building services to for-benefit organizations. We'll hear about that more later. And she's also the VP of Membership and co-chair of the Mentor Program for the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And I'm a mentee, so you should definitely check that out. It's a great program. Sasha Cox is the founder of Trail Mavens, dedicated to bringing together incredible groups of women for outdoor adventures. She's also a professional coach and one of my personal mentors, so thank you for being here. Lana is executive director of Giving Circles Fund, a movement of next-gen philanthropists who utilize the power of collective action to create lasting change. And she speaks at conferences, gatherings, and universities about millennial giving. And so we're so grateful that you're speaking here as well. And David is the former regional vice president of Starbucks Coffee Company. And he's currently on a short sabbatical, and he's evaluating also his next career move. So we're really happy to have you here. So yeah, just in this part of the panel, I just want to kick it off by discussing the early years of your career. So I'll pose this question to all of you. Early in your career, whom did you look to for support, and what were some of the things that inspired you? You can take a second.
Do we start from the left or?
You can start wherever you want.
Sure. So I started my career as a teacher and in education, and also kind of as a coach, and I still see myself as that in a lot of ways. And I started at a school that was founded and funded by Honda, the car company, as a way of giving back to the U.S. for how successful they've been. And so I was sort of blown away by this concept of how, well, if one company would do this, what if I could get other companies to do this? And so I started pursuing a path of, that's a really cool idea, how could we do it? And basically found people who had either served in roles doing CSR, this was back in the mid-90s, I date myself, but really pursued, I was always just really curious. So I know that this doesn't exist, but what if we could get it to exist? And so I basically would ask people about their roles in different foundations, how they got there, people doing CSR, you know, what was your path, how did you get there? And was really fortunate that through reaching out in networks and just being really curious, and asking people, you know, tell me a little bit about what your path was. What did you want to be? And I would actually say, what did you want to be when you grew up? And I also would ask people, really experiential, I would say, you know, if I followed you around all day, what do you do? Just because job titles were not particularly informative. That was my way of getting to, oh, you spend a lot of day, you know, filing or at a computer doing, that does not sound like fun. You know, thanks so much. So I reached out to people across different sectors and always asked those same questions, and it was gratifying on the one hand to hear that people had followed a number of different paths. It was terrifying to hear how many people still didn't know what they wanted to be when they grew up. But I always thanked everybody, and then also asked if there was somebody else that they thought I should talk to. And that was sort of my pattern over and over again was, okay, how did you get there? All right. And so was really fortunate to find a number of mentors within kind of the philanthropic sector, but kind of also outside of it, just mainly by being really curious about how people got there.
Shall we go
I actually also got my start in teaching. I taught at a charter school in East Palo Alto for a couple of years right after I got my master's in education. And then from there transitioned to working with adults instead and working in leadership development and team building and facilitation. And it's interesting hearing you ask that question, Hannah, because it makes me feel kind of bad actually that I didn't have a mentor, and I didn't really when I was in my early 20s. I feel like I just kind of followed, you know, sort of followed the scent on the wind, if you will. Just went where I felt like I was interested, and kept doing things that turned me on.
So I started my career at Deloitte Consulting, where I worked for 4 years in technology consulting, which is probably the most opposite to what I'm doing now. I sort of had no idea what I wanted to do. I studied business in undergrad, and everyone was competing for these consulting jobs. So I thought, well, I don't know what I want to do. I should probably compete for those jobs also. And that was it. That's like how I got there. And you know, I have to say I was pretty miserable. I learned a ton. We were talking about this a few minutes ago. I was pretty miserable in my day-to-day work. And I started drowning myself in nonprofit work because it made me feel better about like the money I was making or wasting my time during the day. And I'd like spend my lunchtime working on those other initiatives. And I knew about 2 years in, you think you'd know sooner, but anyway, about 2 years in, I knew that I needed to make a change, but I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do or how to figure it out. And the best thing that I have ever done was build a personal board. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with what a board of directors is for an organization or for a company, but I decided that I wanted to build one for myself. So I ended up asking 5 people who are definitely mentors, but I wasn't thinking about it in that way, but 5 people who I really admire, I really trust, and who like really believe in me as a person person. And I asked them, like I went to lunch with them or dinner, and I asked them if they would join my personal board and be sort of an advisor to me and help me figure out what I wanted to do next. And it was sort of super informal. I would do dinner with them every couple months. And you know, this was the group of people who made me feel confident in my next move, who helped me make the decision to leave my job at Deloitte and pursue my dreams. And they're still on my personal board now. So I would definitely encourage every person to think about that. And it might be a parent, and it might be, you know, an old teacher, or it might be someone who works with you, or someone who you've worked with. It could be someone you met here. But that was definitely an inspiration and what helped me find my path, I guess.
So I'm actually in transition right now. As Hannah said, I'm currently taking a sabbatical. I'm a lot older than you guys, so I've been working over 30 years, roughly around there. Okay, so I have a very diverse experience. I started off as actually wanting to be a teacher, but never made it there. But it's interesting how the passion that you want to be a teacher carries you through in life and the things that you do. So I started, and I'm going to leave you this one thought before I go further. Is part of what I'm going through right now. Is that as you think about what you want to do next, think about need versus want. Okay, keep that in mind. You know, first when I first got out of high school, everything was a need. Meaning, you know, I grew up pretty poor, you know, in the city, so need was very important. Making money was really important to me. So I wanted to be. That's why the reason I gave up my passion, wanted to be a teacher. I ended up studying, not sure what I want to do. I did not have a mentor. And to your point about creating your own board of director, it's really important. You know, what she just shared with you is so critical. I can't emphasize how important that is that you look into your career. But so I not knowing what I want to do, I went into culinary arts. I actually studied hotel restaurant management. I know how to bake, I know how to cook, okay? But someone did mention to me, said, you know what, David, you should really have something to fall back on. So I thought about, wow, why don't I go to accounting? So I went to accounting, really didn't like it, was pretty good at it, got a pretty good grade, and then like yourself, remember the need versus the want, right? Jobs were pretty tough in the 80s, but I know how I landed. I landed a job with Arthur Anderson, which is one of the big 8 firms, and then Deloitte & Touche was one of the big 4. Status, make good money. I hated it, but I stuck it through, and then went on 4 more years into a regional CPA firm, and then became a CFO and a controller for a venture capital backed startup company, somewhat by a sharper image. So let me speak for a little bit, and then I went through this big change in life. So I look at that's my first bucket life, and then now going back to what I need versus what I want, I decided what I want was I need to do something more fulfilling. So I find that I really have this passion for people. So I took a 250% pay cut, went and joined PepsiCo, the division of Taco Bell, and I ended up spending there 15 years. And I loved every minute of it. And then I had an opportunity to join Starbucks 5 years ago, and again, it was for the passion. So I would say that it's really important that you really do what you like. I mean, I know sometimes, you know, when you're young in your career, you don't think about these things. If I were to, as I coach my daughter, I think it's really important that you do what you like, what your passion is, because success will come within. So, I mean, that's pretty much my early career.
So Sasha, hopefully I won't make you feel uncomfortable with that again. So I am gonna, no, but I think this will, you know, go off of what you were saying before. So you've really, you know, carved a niche for yourself, built your own business, trail mavens, and you know, you're a professional coach among so many other endeavors. So I'm interested in learning about, you know, you didn't have a mentor or someone who was saying, you know, do this. So I'm interested in learning about you know, how you brought together your experience and your interests and your networks, you know, on your own in order to build a career for yourself.
Great question. I think the answer to that ends up being all about space, in the sense that I had been doing sort of leadership development and team building for this company for about 5 years. It was a really high job. I was traveling about 70%, 75% of the time. I got really burned out. I had great airline status. That was the upside. Yeah, but eventually I realized that I needed to take a step back. And there were some things going on in my family which contributed to that. And so at the end of 2012, I decided that I was going to quit my job and travel the world for 10 months. And that's the kind of thing that was eminently terrifying in the moment to think about. And at the same time, I knew that, like, I sort of projected ahead into the future. Like, when I'm 60, am I going to be there thinking, like, oh gosh, I really wish I hadn't traveled the world for 10 months when I was 30? The answer is clearly no. I was definitely going to appreciate that time in my life. And that's sort of what gave me the fortitude to do it. And then it was really in that time, in that, you know, I had 10 months where I wasn't working, and I was just traveling and able to be in the moment. And I don't know if any of you have read the John Allaire book about creativity. No, it's really good. I highly recommend it. But you know, one of the most important things that enables creativity is space. When you're feeling constricted, when like your attention is being demanded at every single moment by something that is like right in front of you, it's really impossible to relax. And it's in those moments of relaxation, like when you're just about to fall asleep or when you're in the shower, you know, those are the moments when creativity is going to hit you. And so it was, you know, 4 months into my trip that I was on a 4-night backpacking trip through Bolivia, and I was like, it was the second morning of the trip, and I was, you know, cooking my oats over my little backpacking stove, and I felt totally relaxed and totally fulfilled, and that was when it was literally in that moment that the inspiration hit for Trail Maidens. I felt like this is something that combines not only my passions, but also my skill set, and also something that I feel like is something that I see as a clearly defined need in our community, like an opportunity for women to learn outdoor skills in a safe space and start to connect with each other and feel really like competent and vibrant in that space. And actually a very similar thing for coaching. It was just like in having all of that time and space, I read a couple of books about coaching. I felt incredibly inspired, and it was like being able to sort of take a breath and relax into the idea of taking an enormous step, not a total departure, because I had always been kind of like working with people, but you know, starting my own business is certainly not something that I'd ever considered before I took this trip, and it was because I had the freedom to like mull on it, you know, to sort of stew the idea for about 6 months before I actually had to do anything about it. I think that's what gave me the fortitude to actually go after it.
So do you feel like you sort of, you know, fell into this job and it became this interest and, you know, passion and turned into a job, or you made a conscious decision, like, at this point I want it to become a career?
Yeah, the latter. I mean, I think the nice thing about when you're coming back from something like quitting your job to travel, you know, taking a sabbatical, when you literally have nothing on your plate, it's like every move that you take, whether you want it to or not, like ends up being really intentional. You know, it's like when there's nothing out there, any step that you take is going to make a mark in the sand. So I came back and thought, well, let's go with this. Let's sort of, you know, throw myself into it and see where it goes. And I had the freedom to do so because I didn't come back and try to take a full-time job immediately. Again, space and time. I gave myself the time and space to explore those things.
Great, thanks, Sasha. I am going to go back to mentorship a little bit with you guys, since you work with the Association of Fundraising Professionals in mentorship, and so through that, and also you know, through your job, you really, you know, you've demonstrated an interest and amazing ability to maximize people's potential. And so, how do you recommend we can find like the right mentor to help us grow, and also what makes a great mentor relationship? So whether that means, you know, you're getting a mentor through the association, you know, fundraising professionals, or you're building a personal board or whatever it may be. What does that look like?
I think you can take a number of formats, and it's two-sided. One is, kind of reiterating both what Lana and Sasha said, is one, like knowing yourself is first really important. That if you don't know what you're looking for, or at least have a sense of what fulfills you, or even on the opposite end, what isn't working for you, those are sort of the two kind of bookends, then you're not gonna know success when you find it. And so as you're seeking out a mentor, I think it's really important to go on those sort of awkward conversations, or maybe not that awkward, but kind of trying people out. I'm really interested in learning more about your experience. And what I've found is that I often joke that philanthropy is far more about hedonism than it is altruism, because everybody likes to feel good. And what you find is that people really like to talk about themselves, ourselves included. And so when you offer to buy people a cup of coffee and say, tell me about yourself, everyone's like, yeah, I'd love to. So it's an easy ask to get into. And one of the things that really drew me to the field is that fundraisers in general are incredibly generous with their time. That, have you had an appeal that's worked? How have you done your board trainings? Because it's really about, I talk about the for-benefit sector, partially to help elevate the conversation, but it's well-run, there are measurable outcomes, and we are maximizing the social return to communities. And so I talk about for-benefit rather than saying not-for-profit, because there is no evidence anywhere that suggests that describing yourself by what you're not is a good way of talking about yourself. So I did not coin that term, by the way. Harvard Business Review made it in when I was writing my master's thesis in 2001. But it unfortunately didn't gain traction, so I'm really trying to put it out there. So everybody who wants to use it, please do. And so the mentorship program with AFP, people are really weird about money. When you talk about investments, it's okay, but somehow when we begin to talk about things when it matters to us, we get really awkward, like our shoulders come in, we avoid people's eye contact, we start to mumble. Like, it's really weird, and yet when this is something that you really care about, whether it's giving your time, your talent, your treasure, what I found was that a lot of people, this happened over and over again, I could never do what you do. People wince and go like this when they talk about fundraising, and they take a step back, which I'm like, it's an uncomfortable thing, and so what I found though was being in the company of people, and I would start to joke, you think I'm gonna come in, take your wallet, and run out the door, and everyone's like, yeah, kinda. And so, in joining AFP, I found a group of people who talked about the joy of giving. We teach people the joy of giving, and within this community, I found people who shared their knowledge. Here's what I did when I was running a major gift campaign. Here, or introducing you to people. And so when I was asked to join the board, first I was really honored. Really? You think I'm qualified enough? And I still have this mental image of myself as just out of college. Although I've seen some recent college graduates. I am nowhere near just out of college. But what I think. In the looking back on what those options were, part of it was knowing myself, and part of it was this idea of paying it forward. That when I thought about this career in philanthropy, I reached out to people and said, I just worked at this school, I'm really interested in doing corporate philanthropy, and so many people were kind enough to have cups of coffee that I feel like it's sort of my duty to the universe to put that back out there. And so when people are interested in learning more, great, let's have a cup of coffee, let's have lunch. And so when AFP invited me to be a mentor and then asked me to be the co-chair, I said, absolutely, this seems like a great opportunity, because too many for-benefit organizations don't have the resources to do the recruitment on campus like the Deloittes, and so people don't know how to enter the sector. And so my concern is that if we don't have talented people entering into the sector, the resources aren't going to come in. And so for me, this seems like a great way of, one, ensuring the longevity of the sector by attracting talented people into the sector by saying this is sort of what it looks like. So it's sort of a pay it forward and a give it back for me.
So I think for people who are really extroverted, that can be really easy. Just saying, let's get coffee, let me message you on LinkedIn, let me call you, whatever it may be. But for people who are introverted, that can be kind of scary. So what do you suggest tangibly, when someone is looking around, if that seems like a little bit scary, how they go about that?
I will reveal, I am an extroverted introvert. I have had to practice. No, honestly, like when I think about going in front of people, I start to sweat. I get a little bit nervous. And so I have a pitch that I'm really comfortable with. I have I do far better with a kind of a one-on-one, even like looking at the room, making eye contact and then kind of scanning again. You know, have a template and just something that's really comfortable that you can just send out and use with people. And so Milana and I were just talking about this. She's been doing interviews all day, and if I were her, I would be hiding in the bathroom stall right now, just be like gathering energy before going outward. And so you know, that was it's okay to be introverted, and yeah, I would just put together a tool set that you're really comfortable with. So an outreach email that's worked, a thank you template. But most of the, as I said, most people are so delighted to talk about themselves that they're, you know, that you don't really have to be nervous about that. But I'm an introvert too, so I feel your pain.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, if you think about some moment when a friend has emailed you or called you being like, I just would really love your advice on something, how did you feel? Yeah, right? You felt like, whoa, amazing, right? So I feel like there's, I don't know, particularly in our culture, there just ends up being some emotion around doing something that's perceived as like asking for help, because it's like, oh, I don't have everything under control, I need somebody else's insight. But I mean, actually, like, Brett, I think what you did is totally amazing, because in effect, in showing vulnerability, you end up showing strength. Like, hey, I know that like I don't have all the answers, and I would appreciate yours. And you end up making feel whoever you reach out to, like you said, honored. Like, they feel amazing.
Maybe that's why you all accepted my invitation.
We're so honored.
Absolutely.
So definitely, you know, when I was, you know, reaching out and asking people what kinds of questions they had for this panel, there were people who were interested in, you know, moving from one sector to another. And so, Lana, that's a great question for you. You know, you started, like you were saying, working as a technology consultant at Deloitte, and then you transitioned to the nonprofit sector. So I'm just wondering maybe what kinds of challenges you encountered, and also how you sold yourself from, you know, one sector to another.
Sure. So I think it's especially easy going from like the for-profit sector to the nonprofit sector. So I had 4 years of intense training and business experience that, you know, is applicable to any type of organization, a for-benefit or a for-profit. So for me, it was actually super beneficial to have the corporate experience, even though I hated it. It's definitely helped me in my career and helped me with things like strategic planning, critical thinking, financial management, all sorts of stuff that I learned at Deloitte that I hated, has helped me be a great executive director. But I think you can go the other way also. So I know plenty of people in nonprofit who ended up wanting to work at a for-profit company in their CSR group or for a corporate foundation, or maybe, you know, they got burned out in nonprofit and are ready to switch over. I think it can go either way. I think what's important if you're going from nonprofit or for-benefit to for-profit, I'm working on it. Just catching up slowly. I think it's really important to focus on what you've actually achieved, like statistics, numbers, because that's what, you know, corporations or for-profit companies are really looking for, and you have those in nonprofit as well. Like the number of dollars raised, the impact that you've had, the number of programs, what you've been able to accomplish on so little. All the times you went above and beyond and exceeded expectations, those are applicable in any field. So, you know, I'm happy to answer individual questions after, but I think you can easily make the switch either way. I think the toughest part is figuring out what you want, what makes you happy. And, you know, you can make good money in nonprofit, just like you can in for-profit, and you can be happy in both. So, you know, I happen to be really happy doing what I'm doing now, but you have to figure out what's right for you.
And David, you know, as a leader yourself, you have managed so many stores. You've managed recently over 700 Starbucks stores, and I think over 1,000 stores when you were working at Yum Brands. And so having managed people and having done a lot of interviews, when you are looking to hire people, what are some qualities that really stand out to you?
Yeah, I think it's really important to really touch upon what is it you want to do when you grow up. I think that's really important. You have to be clear about what you want. And so the question I'm gonna pose to all of you, some of you may be thinking about transition, right? You know, there's a difference between transition and making a change. There's a good book out there. It's called Making a Transition. I don't know if you read it by William Bridges. I highly recommend you go look and read that book. So if you're thinking about making transition, you should think about what is it that you want in life. I think it's very important that you should do something you want to do and that you're passionate about. Something you want to do is versus need. So I'm going to go back to that. It's very important. But the skill set, once you define that, you should think about, what is your next job? And now that looking back on my career, I always thought about I never really thought about what I'm going to do next. I've been fortunate. I have never really had to go after a job. I just happened to get a job. In fact, except for my first job, I really didn't have to go search for a job. So, but I wouldn't give you that advice. I would advise you to think about what is your next new job. Skill set to what you shared, they're all transferable. There's two types of skills. You have your soft skills. Those are skills such as leadership, synergy, your ability to be able to work in multiple teams, right? It could be critical thinking, problem solving, and then you have your hard skills. Now, some jobs might require hard skills. So someone, I interview a lot of people in my career. So when people come for an interview, first of all, I have to look at what job are they interviewing, what are the soft skills, and how do they articulate and be able to articulate and transfer the soft skill to this job. But then the next question, do they have the hard skill? Meaning, you can't come apply for a finance job you don't know anything about finance. So I highly encourage that as you think about what you want to do, take inventory. To your point, they're all transferable. So it's really, really important to do that. I think also as you start thinking about making transition, start thinking about what kind of organization you want to work for. It's not just I want to get a job. Let's be more definitive. I choose Starbucks for one reason. Operations, because I love the fact that I love the value and the principle of Starbucks. It really matches my value about giving back to the community. That there's more to just making a profit. There's a social responsibility. So that was important to me. Nothing else really mattered. I have the soft skill and the hard skill to do that. So I highly encourage you to do that. What is the organization looking for as you get further into your exploration, what you want to do? And then I also would say, does your personal value fit that organization? And then finally, I would say also focus on your strength. Very often people say focus on your opportunity. I think opportunity is important, but focus on your strength, because your strength will overcome a lot of opportunities.
Great. So this brings me to, this time is flying by, the actual final section of our panel, which is really what's next and how to transition to another role or another opportunity. So I'll pose the next question to David. You are taking this time off to regroup, which I think is a really bold move, to leave your job at an amazing, highly branded corporation. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about what are the most important things to think about as you are taking this time.
Yeah, life is always about learning. I learned something with Shasha just now. Yeah, actually, she helped me figure it out. So life is about transition, figuring things out. It's about space. For the last 20 years, more so for the last 5 years, my job is truly 24/7. I was sharing with Skype that I wake up at 4:45 every morning, because that's when the number comes out. And I look at the first thing I do is look. So anyway, it's about space. And for those of you who have read the book, The 7 Highly Effective Habits of people, the last thing that Stephen Covey's talked about is sharpening your saw. I've done very well for the 6th. I have not done well for my 7th. And to your point, Josh, it is about space. For me, it is about making a transition now. It's not about, for me, a change is like changing job would be a change. For me, it's a transition because I'm trying to get more into a perspective what I want to do in my life or the rest of my career. I'm not driven by so much as need versus what I really want to do. And to your point, it's about that space that I have now that I didn't have before. So really, it was very simple. But I realized that for 4 years, my daughter just turned 18. I didn't hardly spend any time with her. And I had great mentors. I have a good board of directors that tells me all the time, David, look for balance. But I really didn't listen to them until one day it's clicked that I need space. So 6 months ago, I made a decision. I actually told Starbucks that I was going to leave at the end of the year. So I worked that plan. And so my next chapter, I was just going to be blunt honest. I'm not sure. I'm thinking, I'm toying about maybe I want to do more philanthropy. I want to, definitely what I want to do is I want to get into something that's going to match my personal value, that's going to give me passion, that I can make an impact on people's lives. Because when I look at my personal brand, I'm a good developer of people. So.
That's wonderful. Again, I really admire that. So bringing it back to something a little bit more tangible, another question for Lana. So one of the topics that has come up a lot is, when you are 5 years into your job, so you're beyond entry level, but you're not quite at the executive level. What do you suggest for people who are in that position trying to make that final step?
Sure, so I'll start by saying it's funny to ask me the question because I applied and got my job as executive director when I was 24. So I had, 3.5 years of experience. So I don't think the years matter, but I'll answer the question anyway. I think that you deserve a job that you believe you deserve. If you go into an interview and you don't think you're worthy of the job, you're not going to get the job. And I read the job description and knew that they were talking about me. And I went after it. I knew that I was the right person for the job. I was the youngest person who applied, and I got the job, and 4 years later, I'm still happy and everything's going great. But that said, I did a lot to make sure that I was ready for this job. So if you're, really looking for what's next, I would encourage you to use resources like Foundation Center, go to trainings and develop your skills in, what the next job that you want, what are the skills you need to be successful. So what I often see is, people who are moving up, let's say in the program space or in the development space, they're lacking the other skills. So if you've been running programs and you want to one day be an executive director, you need to get some fundraising experience. So go to a training or ask someone on, the development director if you can help. And development directors always need help, always, always. So ask if you can help, if you can, look over or draft the next grant proposal, if you could sit in on a couple fundraising meetings to see how it's done, if you could get some coaching. And, I'd really encourage you to think about, in your organization, where would you want to go next? And sometimes, they're really small organizations and you don't see a clear path, and you need to ask your boss or the executive director, you need to ask for what you want. So you want to get more involved with this new program, offer to do it. Ask how you can help. Your job isn't going to get better if you don't speak up. Like, your boss doesn't magically know what you need and that you're bored or that you want to be more fulfilled or you want more responsibility. So you need to ask for it. I guess those are my biggest pieces of advice. If you step up and you show that you can do a good job, you will get more responsibility. And with that will come, a raise or whatever if they want to keep you, or they won't be able to keep you. So I think that would be my advice.
So what's the point at which you would actually ask for a raise? That was not a topic I was going to cover, but I think that's really important. I think that's really important to talk about. It's something that's kind of scary is to ask for a raise. So, it is important to start volunteering to do things. At a certain point, you do want to be compensated for it. So what is that point?
Sure, I don't think, Dan might be really good at that.
I can answer that.
Good one.
There's a book that I want to recommend if you haven't read. It's called The First 90 Days. Have you guys read that book?
I can send out a list of book recommendations.
No. This is a classic. It's The First 90 Days. Anybody who's going to change job need to read this book because it talks about the first 90 days that you're in a new job. And I'm not going to tell you, but you can read it by Michael Watkins. So part of, as you said, you need, it's okay. You need to speak up. You need to play offense when you believe that you deserve more money. I go through this every year. You know, you have a budget, right? So you smile, you know what I'm talking about. But the reason I say first 90 days is that you're in a new job. It's very important to set your expectation and lay out a plan for your supervisor. Things that you want to, you can say, here's the things I want to achieve, here's my timeline, and it's important to have periodic reviews with and you take the initiative with your supervisor and recount the things that it's not like just saying, hey, look what I've done, but it's important for you to talk about your accomplishments. And through that discussion, to your point, you should feel confident to be able to ask, you've done those things. I highly recommend you to do that.
This is less specific to, well, I guess it's specific to both asking for a raise and making transitions. I think it is so useful to have a really clear picture in your mind established of what your legacy is.
Yeah.
Like if you, okay, so another reference, hopefully people will get this one this time. Who's seen It's a Wonderful Life? Yeah, right? Okay, so I forget the main guy's name, but right, he's like, oh, I wish I was never born, and then he goes back and it's, he sees how terrible everything would have turned out if he had never been there. Thank you. Yes, George Bailey. Yes, and like Clarence the Angel or something like that.
Clarence.
Yeah,
Clarence,
exactly. This is this is a tough one, but ask yourself the same question. Like, if you were not at your current organization, what would be different? Like, what would be the impact of your absence? And when you're able to point to those things, like, wow, these 8 things never would have gotten done, and like this culture and community never would have been built. I think that's like a very powerful bargaining chip.
That's great. And yeah, over to you, Sky. So I think that a mindset that really permeates the nonprofit world is a discomfort with the concept of people making money by helping others, and with that also comes like asking for a raise. And so as we know, salaries are typically lower in the for benefit world. So I'm wondering, as a consultant for organizations and leaders and people, do you have suggestions about how we can break out of this mindset?
I think there is an issue. What really resonates in these comments is that how our resources are allocated are not well aligned with the values that we have, and I think that's really present in the for-benefit sector. That when you look at how money even gets invested and where the resources come, I just think something fundamentally needs to change. So I'll just say that first, and then in terms of one thing that I do both in my work and even with my clients, I do a lot of work with the executive directors or development directors. I just say you have to make your time tangible, and part of that is that nobody that I've met works a 40-hour week. So I just said, but when you start looking at your goals, I don't want you to assume that you're going to have 70 hours. So I don't believe in a zero-sum mentality, but resources are finite. And so I think as you look at your time, a lot of the work plans that I create are look at where your resources are coming, and you should allocate your time in that same way. And so if 50% of your funding is coming from your individual donors, 50% of your time needs to be spent on individual donor cultivation. Like, it just needs to be aligned in that way. And so that metric of it, as you look at the time that you're spending in your role, as you take on more leadership roles, that has a benefit to the organization. That in your absence, somebody else would have to do that, or you're providing a benefit to the organization, and so you can quantify that. And so I think it's important that you advocate for yourself. And that's also an opportunity, whether it's you have your personal board or even as you get a mentor, you say, these are the goals that I'd like to have. Like when I meet with my mentees, I tell them up front, I'm not a micromanager, I don't enjoy it, it's not a strength of mine. I'm very Socratic. So we're gonna discuss what your goals are, whether it's month by month or even just sort of say what you wanna get out of this year, but you need to come with your goals and I'm gonna hold you accountable. And so that's something that you can also say is that as you look at your current role and you think about the impact that you want to be making there and how much time you have to spend, I think is your argument valid? And nobody else is gonna say, you know what, you've been working really hard, and at the end of the year, maybe they will do that, but oftentimes you have to be that advocate for yourself. And I think sometimes it's easier to take a step back, give yourself that space and quantify what you're doing to be able to assess that, and then say, here's the benefit that I'm having to the organization, and I think it should be commensurate with what I'm being paid. The other thing that I would say is that in addition to opportunities within the organization, there are a lot of organizations that need board support, and that's another great opportunity to grow your leadership skills. And so you can come on and roll up your skills and get finance experience by being on a board that way, or get events experience. If you maybe not seek out everything within your organization, although that's obviously a good way to do it if you want to stay there, but don't overlook opportunities outside the work that you're doing to gain that extra skill set.
I think that's such a good point. This is something I would ask all of you. So when is that time, because we want to stay in a job and really learn from the people around us and really grow, how do we know when the time is that, maybe I can't move up anymore here and maybe it's time to move on to the next thing?
The sort of obvious answer to me feels like when do you get up in the morning and feel like, oh, I've got to go to work instead of I get to go to work? Just that got get.
I think it's really important, as Charlie said, it is about passion. This is about what you want to do with your life. And I think that it is also important that when you find yourself that you don't have personal growth anymore. Now, that could be meaning many things. For some of you, again, the want versus need, right? Maybe at some point in your life, you do need to make more money, and that's okay. And there's some times where you find that the money's good, but you want to expand your horizon and to get more diverse experience to plan your next 2 jobs. So it has to be a plan and strategy in terms of what you want to do with your career.
And something that we haven't touched upon, but I think all of you have gone to school more than once to get another degree. So also, when is the right time to further your education instead of maybe moving up in your organization? Or maybe you're staying at your organization but taking classes on the side. What are your thoughts on actual job experience versus education? You're all like looking at me.
I'll answer that. So every one of my job, or every time I have a new job, there's never a job that I know everything. So for me, I've been very fortunate. I work for big companies. So there's a lot of in-house training that are taught by people who are expert within the organization. That's one. Second, I highly recommend if there's a skill that you need or you don't know and you have an interest, go for it. Don't wait. Don't wait for, I think you mentioned, don't wait for people to tell you. Go get the experience. Raise your hands and I want to volunteer to do that. Because then time is on your side. Very often when you make the transition and you need a skill and you don't have it, that's when you get stress and pressure. That's when the job's no fun. So it's important to take inventory. First of all, take inventory of what you want to do and take inventory of what skills you have. And make a conscientious effort to get those skills. I think sitting on board is a great experience. It was for me. I have never sat on, I've never been involved with nonprofit before. I love the fact of going out and do community work. And I was sharing with Hannah and Sky earlier. For me, it was a really big experience for me. Here in private industry, we went fast. You don't have to get everything right. You make decisions, you go. And in the nonprofit world, there's the thing about funding, and things take a little longer, and I have to learn patience. I mean, really, it's been a challenge for me. And I actually shared that, you know, and so I've been very involved with United Way, and that's where I met Hannah. And I said to Hannah Wilson, I said, wow, you know what? There's so many protocols, so many procedures, you know? I mean, at work, we just say, okay, this product is not selling, what is it we need to do? How do we innovate? Let's move. You don't get 100% right. Howard Schultz would say, you don't have to get everything right, get 80% right. You're there. And if you're not making money, you find solution now. Where what I'm learning is that in the nonprofit world, it's been good discipline for me. That you have to take a different set of strategy, and things are not that easy. And you have to be constantly planning because it is predicated on funding. Funding, right? Okay.
I would just say I'm somebody who loves learning, and I think that that passion for learning and being a lifelong learner will suit you in whatever career you want to do. That being said, I'm a yes and person, so yes and.
Sasha doesn't
I think it's also important to keep in mind what Lana was saying in terms of if you think that you're the best fit for the job. I think one of the best things you can do is look at a job description and almost match your skills to it. I'm good at this, here's where I've had an impact, and advocate for yourself. Because it is easy to say, oh, well, I can't do that until I have X degree, and yet, you know, the Foundation Center's resources, there's so many free resources that could help advance your education, and that confidence that you can do the job and being able to quantify that will actually get you just as far. And the other part of it is in your current role, if you're not getting more money or opportunities for growth, the best way to find out is to ask directly and often. I am really interested in advancing. Is there an opportunity for me to do that within this role? Or I'm willing to take this role, but you know, is there a possibility for me to grow within the next 1 year? And being clear about your priorities, because sometimes we don't have the luxury of being flexible on how much we get paid. I used to get paid $5 an hour for babysitting, and for some reason, that was like my first job, and I started when I was 10, and there's still that mentality that breaks down into dollars per hour. It's so weird, like that was sort of the baseline by which that I did, and so I think it's just really clear that those priorities for you, sometimes your priority will be making money, which means the compatibility of how much time and resources you dedicate to that component of it may be less compatible with the flexibility that you have for free time or rewarding or something like that, but being clear about what your priorities, so when you go in and say, I'm willing to travel 75% of the time knowing that you're going to compensate that for me because that's a finite resource. And same thing about I'm not willing to do that because I've got high school kids and I don't want that resource is no longer valuable to me. Then it gives you that, you can be very clear in your negotiations about what you want and what you want to get out of it, but asking is really the most effective way of doing that, even though it may, and that's another one of those fear-inducing kind of causes you to sweat. Practice in front of a mirror or get those other people. Because otherwise you're like, oh, I'm going to get there, and then you're like, I just wanted to know, I mean, you're probably not going to want to, and you get this way, and then somebody's like, I think you were going to ask me a question somewhere in there, and so you want to go in and present that to yourself, but get those jitters out of the way first. With somebody who knows you and loves you, and that's the beauty of a mentor or your board or somebody who's like, okay, you're awesome. Let me tell you, you're awesome. Let's practice that again, because there was a sentence in there, I just didn't catch it.
And just because it always bears repeating, and I was just at the Businesswomen of California conference earlier today, thinking about that list of prerequisites. This is for the women in the crowd. If you haven't read Lean In, even if you have, it's a good reminder. 10 requirements for a job. A man will look at those requirements, say, I've got 6 of them. Awesome, I'm applying. A woman will look at them and say, I've got 9 of them. Ugh, shucks. I should really work on getting that 10th one ironed out before I apply. Yeah, what's next to that?
I'll also jump in and say, so Sky mentioned this earlier, I'm hiring right now and been doing interviews, and you know, to the question about grad school versus experience, like, you know, maybe half the applicants have master's degrees and half of them don't, but have interesting experience, and I don't weigh one more than the other. In both situations, it's about like what you've learned and what you've accomplished, and it's about your passion. So, you know, you don't have to have a master's degree to be able to, you know, kick butt at the job that I have, but it could help. So I don't have a master's degree, and I have a ton of experience being an executive director for 4 years, and I know people who want to move up in their organization, and to do so they need a master's degree. So it really again depends on what your personal goals are and where you see yourself in 5-10 years. Like for me, taking a couple years off before doing what I love wasn't cool. Like I wanted to do it now while I have time and energy. And yeah, sometimes I wake up and think, oh, I really wish that I went to school and I really want to learn things, but I try to do that in other ways, and who knows, maybe one day I'll go back, but I think it's really a personal question, and school is really expensive and you can get experience in other ways. School is also incredible, so.
2 points I would make. One, yeah, I agree with you. When I've done a lot of interviewing, when we hire directors, and these are pretty big positions for Starbucks. It's not always about they have lots of education. It is about the ability to tell stories and articulate their experiences and their competencies and how you can apply that in the job, and the confidence how they do it is very important. That's one. Second, I would also suggest, everyone have mentioned this, really having that personal board director that you can tap into, especially board of directors. Could be multiple number of people who are in a position to make decisions in their job, and people should be very good at what they do. I mean, you tap into them. To your point, you can do a marketing review. You can tap into them, and people that you can trust who will give you the honest answer, because that's a safe place to be.
Great. So I have one last question, and this is something that Sasha and I were talking about earlier, and then I'll let you guys ask away Q&A. We talked a little bit about how we all have a purpose, and so wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you can understand your purpose, and then I'd love to hear you guys also, and what that means in terms of finding a career that works for you.
Yeah, so I, in my practice as a coach, work a lot with purpose, and I feel like purpose is just it's like a definitive statement about the impact that you want to make on the world. So when you are at your retirement party, when you're 80, and you have like all of your family and your closest friends and everybody you've worked with around you, and they're all like stepping up to the mic to give a toast about you, what is it that you want them to be saying? What is the impact that you want to have had on all of those people? And I think when you have a purpose that way, that is clearly defined, for example, for me, my purpose is essentially creating, changing perspectives and creating space for people to see their own capacity. Once you have that, it's like a North Star. And so regardless of where you are in the world, you're always sort of able to orient yourself to that. So regardless of, whether you're in a job or you're unemployed or I don't know, or you're in school, you can always kind of like harken back, okay, that is what I want to do. How do I make that work given my context at the moment? I actually realized I have no idea what that answer is.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
Well, I guess we can move move to Q&A. So you're welcome to, pose a question to one of the panelists, to all of them. You guys, if there's something that you didn't cover that you want to talk about, please chime in. So I'll open it up to all of you. Kayla.
So several of you have talked about the importance of taking space to kind of move on to that transition with some intentionality. But for those of us who might not be able to travel for 10 months, or like what are some tangible ways to kind of incorporate that space into your everyday life? I know you mentioned like before you go to sleep or in the shower. Do you have any other tips for that?
So the question was, if you don't have, the time or ability to travel and things like that, what are the things that you can do on a daily basis?
Yeah. There is a lot of scientific research that has spoken to the power of meditation. I think creating, and I feel sort of lame saying this because I feel like everybody talks about meditation, but no, actually, I think that if you take 5 or 10 minutes each day to create that headspace, there is coincidentally an awesome app called Headspace, which is very meditation. I don't know if there's also a book, but it is a great app. Yeah, I love it. And I think there's there's something about being really present in the moment. I think that meditation helps with being really present in the moment so that you can kind of ask yourself and like touch base, you know, when you're, I don't know, at work and you're feeling however, like, okay, what is it exactly that I'm feeling? Like, what's that about? I feel like sometimes our emotions get kind of like all clouded up and then we end up just feeling, you know, at the end of the day, maybe we just feel like disgruntled. I don't know, whatever it is. And you're like, but I can't actually figure out why. Just even little like snippets of time during the day to check in with yourself and see how you actually feel, I think is wildly useful.
I'll add a couple other, on the woo-woo factor. There's a book called Write It Down, Make It Happen. And it's written by a PhD, and it actually outlines, it has great exercises, it's really readable, but it gives you, like, I wasn't able to take off 10 months, but at every time that I've left a position, I've actually spent that time, and I've done informational interviews at every different time. And because I love philanthropy, and I said, okay, I don't believe that there's just one career path. And so I've always spent, maybe it's one afternoon, or I'm just like, you know, just spend one day, maybe it's a weekend or one lunch a month that you go and say, I'm gonna just go and talk to somebody, or one coffee. You can carve that one piece out, but the Write It Down, Make It Happen actually has exercises in it that you could go, like I spent my birthday, before I started Keel, I actually spent my birthday at the beach reading the book, and I left my phone in the car. And so that was my gift to myself, was I wanted that space to be able to think about it, and just wrote down a bunch of ideas with the expectation of, let me just give myself that time. On a more structured note, and again, this one requires a bit more resources. The Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation tests your aptitudes. And it's a 3-day test, and they test everything from spatial awareness, color recognition, sound, recording them, and at the end of those days you do what I recall is kind of like this is what your aptitudes look like, tell me what kind of careers. And it was everything from transforming the juvenile justice system to teaching financial management. Philanthropy was in there, which was awesome. But I did that when I left one position, and I believe it was like $800 or something. So that was something else that if you are really at a position and you have that opportunity to invest in it, it was nice to have a booklet that told you everything of what your aptitudes and your strengths are. But there are lots of books and resources that you can do that where you don't have to invest in it. But that's another tangible step that you can do as you consider if you're like, oh, I really don't know. Our brains get overwhelmed with more than 5 choices. So, I mean, literally, it's true. It's why they break down, our social security number and stuff like that. So you're less likely to do anything if there's too many options. So if you are really stuck and you have that luxury, it's a middle step between 10 months off and.
Yeah, and I actually take back what I said and just say, like, what makes you feel spacious? You know, like for me, it's going on a hike. For you, it's maybe something entirely different. I don't know. I posit it probably doesn't involve your phone. I posit it terribly.
Yes, something that I always share with my team, and my team actually came along and did this, is that we schedule an update on the Outlook every day, just 15-minute thinking time. Whatever you want to do, it has nothing to do with work, just time for you to reflect. And I actually asked my team to do that because, you know, in our world, we were moving so fast. Sometimes we forget to give space. So you have to be very intentional and make space for that. And I was guilty of it because my day was on Monday. You know, on Monday it starts at 4:30. Next thing you know, it's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, because everything backlogs from Monday. So, but being intentional and having the 15-minute where I just shut everything down and just reflect, it really helps the mind.
Yeah, I know people who like walk to work every day 30 minutes just to have, no music or anything, just to have some time. For me, I live with my sister, we're really close, and she's my person who, if anything's going on, or I'm not sure, like I'm feeling unhappy or unfulfilled, like what is it? And it's sometimes hard to figure out on your own. I go home and talk it out with my sister, and sometimes she just listens and doesn't even say anything, but that's how I talk it out. And you know, when I was transitioning out of Deloitte, there was a lot of that with, you know, my personal board and my family trying to figure out, you know, is there a way to make my experience at Deloitte better, or do I need to leave? And, you know, I spent a long time trying to make my experience at Deloitte better, and it ultimately didn't work for me, so I left. But, you know, there are many people who are unhappy in their jobs, and they figure out what it is, and they talk to their supervisors, or ask for more responsibility, or, you know, they want to feel more challenged, or unhappy with who they're reporting to, and you speak up, you figure out what it is. Like, telling your boss you're unhappy isn't going to help. You need to know what could make you happy, and then you ask for it. And you can make your current situation better.
I think it's very similar, kind of feeling stuck for many different reasons, from having a team that I feel responsible for, you know, compensation, things like that. So I don't know if this is a question or just kind of a comment, but I think one of the other things that is difficult is really believing that I'm working for a Fortune 500 consulting firm, wanting that kind of give back and going over to the for benefit side of things, that it really will be better over there, and that I'll really feel fulfilled from doing that, because I feel like there's a lot of efficiencies that are lacking in the for benefit, and you know, the compensation and all these other types of things. So maybe it's just selling myself that there are great things on that side too. I just feel like that's potentially something.
There are great things.
I mean, I think in the same way, like, experience is the best experience, and to some extent that I think there's a narrative that it is so fulfilling in the for-benefit sector that you're willing to forego, you know, a 250% pay cut, you know,
Moral income,
Yeah.
moral income.
yeah, the more, you know, and I think, you know, and I think that, again, recognizing what you need and why you're doing it is really important before you go in, and also just recognizing fit in terms of what you're seeking. So if you are not fulfilled, when I taught high school, I used to say, is it a fish or is it a salmon? And you can tell me it's totally fine, like, that sucked, but you have to tell me why. And so, you know, I think as you consider that transition, you know, going back to Lana's point, that that if you're the problem or you're unhappy, you're going to be just as unhappy wherever you are, there you are. You might be just as unhappy in that next spot, and so don't elevate the status of a sector without recognizing what it was that didn't work. So if you are powerless or voiceless or overwhelmed, you may be in a position where you don't have the capital yet because you just came on board, and you are now have fewer resources and just as big of a team. So I think in the interview process, be really clear about what you're looking for, what you offer, and what you can't do, or what you're unwilling to do. You know, that make that interview process as much a tryout for them as it is for yourself.
Also, what helped me was I knew that if things didn't go great, Deloitte would take me back. They would be so excited to have me back. I never wanted that to happen, but that helped me, like, with the courage to leave. Like, they didn't want me to leave. They wanted me to stay. I left anyway, and I knew that they would be so excited if I came back, which I never want to happen and never will happen, but, you know, you can go back. It's not like once you dive in to for benefit, you're stuck there forever. You know, your career is your career, and you can accomplish a lot, you know, for benefit, and not every organization is going to make you really happy, for profit or not for profit. So yeah, I agree with what Chris said.
Hi, my name is Jen. I'm from Jumbo Ventures. I have a question for panel. You guys did talk about a lot about what helped you throughout your career. I would like to pose the question of what mistakes, looking back in the 5 or 10 years of your professional experience, have you made, and what did you learn from it? And to address the question about space, I find that forcing yourself to leave at 5 o'clock and do something else that you like is really helpful. Yeah, so the question is what mistakes that you made in the past professional life, and what you learned from it.
Oh man, mine is so clear. So And it's so clear because, precisely because I had my purpose pretty clearly defined. I was taking sort of a part-time role doing fundraising at a nonprofit. And even before I took the job, I remember I had a conversation with my brother and I was like, you know, I don't necessarily think this is like aligned with my life purpose, but I think I might just take it anyway. Just because it was a friend who was offering me the job, and it, you know, was with an organization whose their purpose I really admired, even though it did not align with mine. And I think that it ended up being not a positive experience for me. There are so many wonderful ways that you can express who you are in the world, and you can make a difference. And like, just because a way is good does not mean that it is your way. You know, my way is not your way. Your way is not your way. We all have different ways, and being aware of that.
I would say that has anybody read the Underdeveloped report? It was put out by Haas and Compass Point. Okay, a couple folks. It was published in January, about 2 years ago, and I read it, and it was like my career was on these pages, and it just talked about this 2-year tenure for development directors where it's increasing expectations, fewer resources, and I was like, oh my God, this is me, exactly. And the mistake that I made was that if I just work harder, it'll get done. And so the last position that I had when I left, they hired 5 people to replace me. When I look back on the mistakes, I worked through the swine flu. That is like my lowest point in my professional career, was that I worked through the swine flu. I worked from home because there were pregnant people in the office, and I was like, oh, I just took this job. It's just a little bit of a fever. So dumb. So I think when I transitioned, I recognized that there has to be that point of setting boundaries, and I needed to do that. And so part of my reason for starting HEAL was actually to help address that gap, was that people hated fundraising and there was nobody providing that mentor, like there's not a pipeline going in. But I also recognized I was a significant part of that problem. Oh yeah, I can do it. I'll just work a little bit harder, and so just get a little bit earlier, work a little bit later. And so in that setting the boundaries, I actually will not respond. I might look at my emails before 8 a.m., but I do not respond to clients before then. And after 6 p.m., I don't go back online. And I take a tech Shabbat over the weekend, so I may look at them. My Sunday nights are almost sleepless. I've gotten a little bit better, but I just don't do that. And so I set those boundaries up because we wanted to have a family, and I needed to start practicing the behavior. You can't go from working 7 days a week, 70 hours, and then just be like, oh, I'm just gonna switch off. Like, it just doesn't work. You know, you're talking about it, like I still get up at 45. It takes practice. So my early career mistakes were that I was terrible at delegating. I was really uncomfortable saying no, and just thought if I worked a little bit harder. So I finally realized after the swine flu that it's not a sustainable way of doing that, and I'm far better. I still need to work on delegating. It takes me a little bit, but that was a big recognizing my own culpability and my own strength in the positive way of it was a big realization.
I'll add about knowing when to say no or how to say no. My biggest mistake, probably 2 or 2.5 years ago, I was totally burned out, just totally. No social life, working 24/7. Everyone asked me, join this board, join this committee, speak at this thing, travel this conference, do this training. And I was so honored and excited, and I was saying yes to everything, and I was driving myself into the ground. And one of the hardest things that I learned was how to say no. And what I would encourage you guys to do is, if you know what you want, you can say yes to the right things and make time for the right things. So by saying yes to everything, I made myself a disaster. And in terms of looking for jobs, if you have all types of random stuff on your resume, it's not clear what you want or what you're looking for, or that you have a story or a goal you're trying to reach. So just because someone asked you doesn't mean that you should do it. You should be gracious in your no, and just say that your mission is this, and you really appreciate the opportunity, but you want to focus on X, Y, Z, and figuring out whether it's extended learning or joining a board or whatever it is, figure out the thing that will help you get what you want or that makes you most excited. And don't say yes to everything because you don't have time to do everything or to do everything well.
You know, I don't have much more to add. It's similar, you know, just lack of balance and not know how to say no. I create this reputation that I was really good at turning things around. So when I said I never had to go for promotion, it happened because I was good at turning around. My specialty was turning around underperforming operations. So what happens is you become the go-to guy. I did that in Young for 15 years. And so when I came to Starbucks, it was fantastic. But I didn't know how to say no. But what I did find, the counterbalance was that I found pleasure in being involved in community work. So that helped give me some balance. But again, Northern California and Starbucks was a very difficult region. It's one of the high-profile regions from Seattle to Seattle, you know, New York, and then Northern California. So I think, you know, and I've been working for quite some time. Even where I'm at my career, I have to admit that I was not good at saying no. And so until now, where I'm saying I need to stop and create, to your point, create the space, and you know, and spend some time with family and people who are important to me. Yeah. So you guys gave me some great advice, you know.
That was great. Well, you turned a question about mistakes into a little bit of advice for all of us. So I just want to thank you so much. It's great, so thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It was my honor that you all said yes. And before you leave, we just want to say one little piece about YNPN membership. So first, let's give them a round of applause.
Making mental notes. I wanted to take this time, speaking about developing your skills and that sort of thing, and invite you guys, if you're interested, to volunteer with YNPN. On your programs, there's my email, so feel free to get in touch. I'll be here if you want to talk a little bit about volunteering, and you can always learn more on our website, but it's a great opportunity to devote about maybe 10 hours or so a month to this organization and develop the skills you're interested in to make that transition. Thank you so much.
Thank you.